The title of tonight's talk is called Taking Refuge, Facing Crisis. Earlier on, before we started, we paid homage to the Buddha, and we also took the refuges by saying Buddham Saranam Gacchami and so forth. Do you exactly know the reasons, significance, and importance of taking the three refuges? In several suttas, the Buddha has talked about how important or how valuable the taking of the refuges are. For example, in one sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya, in the Book of Twos, the Buddha talked about repaying one's debt to one's parents. I'm sure many of you would have heard about this. The Buddha said that if one were to carry one's parents each on one shoulder for 100 years and take very good care of them, even when they become incontinent, to wipe their feces and excrement and so forth, one will still be unable to repay one's debt that one owes to them. However, if one is able to encourage one's parents who do not have faith in the Triple Gem, so that they have faith in the Triple Gem and they are established in taking refuge in the Triple Gem, this is one of the ways that one can more than just repay the debt that one owes to one's parents. Besides establishing faith in them, if one can also encourage immoral parents to become moral and establish them in moral precepts, if one can encourage stingy parents to become generous and establish them in generosity and giving, if one can encourage ignorant parents so that they can grow in wisdom and be established in wisdom, that also can more than repay the debt that we owe to one's parents. So this is one of the important things that one can do to repay one's debt. In another sutta called the Punya Visanda Sutta, Stream of Merits, Anguttara Nikaya, Book of 8, Sutta number 39, the Buddha talked about 8 streams of merit. Streams of the wholesome, nourishments of happiness which are heavenly, ripening in happiness, conducive to heaven, and which lead to whatever is wished for, loved and agreeable, to one's welfare and happiness. And out of these 8 streams, the first 3 are taking refuge in the Triple Gem. The rest of the 5 refer to 5 great gifts. These great gifts are pristine, of long-standing, traditional, ancient, and unadulterated. What do you think these 5 great gifts are? Any tries? Any Dhamma speakers here? Giving a vihara to the Sangha? Making a dana to the Sangha headed by the Buddha? Well, let's see what it says. The Buddha says that when one observes the precepts, not killing, not stealing, not committing sexual misconduct, not lying, not getting intoxicated, one is actually giving to immeasurable beings freedom from fear, hostility and oppression. The law of karma works this way. You reap what you sow. So because of that gift, he himself will enjoy immeasurable freedom from fear, hostility and oppression. So these are the 8. Another very interesting story is found in the Samyutta Nikaya, and it's about a person by the name of Saranani. Saranani is a Sakyan, and he was an alcoholic. One day he died, and then the Buddha declared that he had become a Sotapan. You know what's a Sotapan? A stream winner, a person who has attained to the first stage of enlightenment. Now, it's really common knowledge among people at the time that the Sotapan is supposed to be virtuous. Virtuous means he doesn't break the 5 precepts. Right? He doesn't take intoxicants. When they heard that this person, Saranani, who is an alcoholic, had become a Sotapan, then people started to make fun. They say, oh, if he can become a Sotapan, so can I. How can he become a Sotapan? So at that time, Mahanama, who was the Buddha's cousin, heard this commotion, approached the Buddha and related what happened to him. Then the Buddha said, Mahanama, when a lay follower has gone for refuge over a long time to the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha, how could he go to the woeful realms? That was what he said. How many of you have taken refuge in the Buddha and Dhamma and the Sangha for a long time? So it seems from this statement that a person who has taken refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma and the Sangha will not fall into the woeful realms. Then now you can have something to say to the Christians. The Christians say if you believe in Jesus, you'll go to heaven. You can say if you take refuge in the triple gem, you won't go down to hell. In the Samyutta Nikaya, Sagatha, Vagga, Devata Samyutta, the background story is that the families of the Buddha's parents, one came from the Sakyans and the other one came from the Koliyas. At that time, the two different clans were quarreling over the use of water from the river Rohini, because one was upstream and the other one was downstream, and it was a dry weather, so they were rushing to get the water to irrigate their fields. So on account of water, the two clans were poised for battle. When the Buddha knew about this, he appeared before them and gave them a discourse which managed to appease them. As a result, the two clans were very grateful, and they allowed 250 men from each clan to renounce the world, to become monks, and shortly afterwards 500 of them became arahants. So at that time the Buddha was seated in their company, and it seems that the Devas and the Brahmas from several world systems all came to pay homage to this group of 500 arahants headed by the Buddha. It's called the Mahasamaya, the great occasion. So at that time, a couple of Brahmas came down from Suddhavasa, the pure abodes. This is a realm of existence that is reserved for anagamis, non-returners. They have attained the third level of enlightenment, and after their death as human beings, they are reborn in the Brahma world, Suddhavasa, pure abodes. So when they knew about this great occasion, they also came down from the Brahma world, and each of these Brahmas recited some verses in the Buddha's presence. And one of them said, "Those who go to the Buddha for refuge will not fall to the plane of misery. Once discarding the human body, they will feel the hosts of devas." What he's trying to say is that those who take refuge in the triple gem, after they pass away, will be reborn in heaven. In several suttas, Sakka, the king of Tawatingsa heaven, also acclaimed the taking of refuge, because he said that the new devas who appeared in Tawatingsa heaven outshone the other devas in terms of brightness, splendor and glory, because they had taken refuge in the triple gem. In one sutta called the Velama Sutta, Anguttara Nikaya, book of 9, sutta number 20, the Buddha talked about his past life as Velama the Brahmin and how he did great dana, massive dana, through a period of time. In one of my CDs called The Spectrum of Merits, I talked about Velama Sutta and described the massive, the great, magnificent dana that Velama the Brahmin did. Velama the Brahmin was our Gautama Buddha in a past life. Despite the great dana that he did, Gautama Buddha said that at that time no one actually purified his dana, because there was no one who was really worthy of his dana, so that he would give the dana high karmic returns. Compared to that massive dana that Velama did at that time, if one were to just give a simple meal to a Sotapan, one who has attained the first stage of enlightenment, that merit gain would far surpass that of the great dana that Velama did. And then the Buddha kept on comparing giving dana to various enlightened beings at higher stages of attainment. So giving a meal to a Sakadagami, a once returner, someone who has attained to the second stage of enlightenment, is equivalent to giving a meal to 100 Sotapans. And then giving a meal to an Anagami is equivalent to giving a meal to 100 Sakadagamis, and so forth. So he went up until giving dana to the Sangha headed by the Sammasambuddha. And even higher than that is building a vihara, a building, and donating it to the Sangha from the four directions. not to an individual member, but to Sangha from the four directions, meaning that any member of the Sangha coming from anywhere will have access to use that building. That is supposed to be a very high level sort of giving. And yet, the fruits of such giving cannot compare to the great fruits of taking refuge in the Triple Gem. And even greater than taking refuge in the Triple Gem is observing the 5 precepts. And even greater than observing the 5 precepts is practicing metta bhavana. When you milk a cow, you pull the udder, just as long as it takes to just pull the udder. If you are able to radiate loving kindness to all beings for that short period of time, that merit will give you greater fruits than just observing the 5 precepts. And even higher than that would be practicing of vipassana meditation, the ability to perceive the arising and passing away of phenomena from moment to moment. So these are various levels of merit. After one has taken refuge in the Triple Gem, one can still corrupt the act of taking refuge. If one is ignorant of the actual act of taking refuge. Ignorance will lead to doubt, and doubt will lead to wrong views. What is meant by ignorance? What sort of ignorance? When one is taking refuge, one does not understand the reasons for doing so. Why do you take refuge in the Triple Gem? Secondly, what is the significance of taking refuge? And thirdly, what are the qualities of the refuge objects? There are 3 objects that you take refuge in, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Do you really understand what the qualities of the Buddha are, the qualities of the Dhamma, the qualities of the Sangha? Why do you take refuge in the first place? And after taking refuge, what is the significance of doing so? So when one does not understand all these 3 aspects, then that will lead to doubt, suspicion, and indecision. Let me give some examples. Some people feel that taking refuge in the Triple Gem means that when you have any problems, you just recite the name of the Buddha and your problems will be solved. Do you think that helps? It might, Don't underestimate that. Let me give you a few examples. One of our monks, I think the only Tamil monk in Malaysia, he's got over 10 vasas now. One day he was invited to stay in a durian orchard, and the orchard was owned by a Malay man who was a bomoh. But the orchard caretaker was a Chinese, and this happened in Batu Maung in Penang, Pulau Pinang. This orchard caretaker was a sort of a Buddhist, so he built a little hut there and he invited monks to come and stay. So one day this monk went to stay there. He was a meditating monk, so he's not very much into chanting. He will chant only when it is necessary. One day he was lying down taking a siesta or resting, and then suddenly he felt his whole body immobilized, paralyzed. He couldn't move at all. And he felt that there's a strange presence in the room where he was staying. He tried to open his eyes, and he could see from the corner of his eyes that there was a genie at the table flicking through his Dhamma book, trying to find out what is this all about. And then he said the genie sensed that he was looking at him through the corner of his eye, so immediately the genie pointed a finger at his left eye. The finger had a very long fingernails and was going to poke his eye, and he was immobilized. And so what did he do? There's a time when he did Buddham Saranam Gacchami. And when he said Buddham Saranam, even before he finished saying Gacchami, the genie disappeared. So it helps also, don't underestimate that. It happened to me also one day when I was still a very young Samanera in MBMC in Penang. At that time, it was in 1979, before I went to Burma to get my higher ordination. A senior monk was staying there. In the evening, after office, a pretty girl walked into the temple and she came to see us. I was there with the senior monk in the hall. She came in and she said, "Bhante, I was walking along the road and then suddenly somebody gave me a betel-nut leaf packet. And after I accepted it, then I felt in a daze, felt gong-gong. So can you help me?" Then the senior monk said, "Oh, don't worry, you just pass that package to this young monk." So he passed me the packet, and very naively I took the packet and I threw it into the waste paper basket. And then he said, "Okay, then you just follow me. Namo tassa," and then he recited Buddhang Saranam Gacchami, and after that the girl said, "Oh, thank you very much, now I feel better." So after that she left the center. And she left the center and I went back to my kuti. Then in the evening when I was taking a rest, suddenly I felt there's a very evil presence in my room. My hair stood on end. And then I felt that my heart was being squeezed. The heartbeat was very fast. I didn't feel comfortable at all. So at that time also I started to recite Buddham Saranam Gacchami, Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. After some time, the thing disappeared. So don't just underestimate that. That's also quite useful at times. You can do that. But there are more profound reasons for taking refuge in the Triple Gem. Then the meaning and significance of taking refuge. When you take refuge in the Triple Gem, then you become a lay disciple. That's what the Buddha said, because one day Mahanama, a Sakyan cousin of the Buddha, approached him and asked him, what does it constitute to be a lay disciple, an upasaka? And the Buddha said, one who has taken refuge in the Triple Gem. What does it constitute to be a virtuous upasaka? The Buddha answered, one who observes the 5 precepts. So even if you don't observe the 5 precepts, if you take refuge in the Triple Gem, you automatically become a Buddhist, so to speak, a lay follower. But if you want to be a virtuous lay follower, then you observe the 5 precepts. So another thing is that if one doesn't understand truly the qualities of the refuge object, who is the Buddha? What's so great about the Buddha? What's the Dhamma? What's so great about Dhamma? Why should I take refuge in the Dhamma? What's the Sangha? Who is the Sangha? Many people, particularly in traditional Buddhist countries, don't really quite understand what these qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha. And they treat the Buddha as a sort of a god. So you can see in traditional Buddhist countries that when they have problems with their life, relationships, or with crisis in life, then they would go to the stupa, make an offering, pray to Buddha and ask for Buddha's help. And eventually their problems might be resolved. And then they come back with larger offerings as a form of gratitude to make to the stupa. This happens very often, particularly in Burma. If you go to Burma, you can see that on top of almost every hill, there is a pagoda. There's a stupa. In the evenings, at these stupas, you will see people meditating there or praying. Usually they will use beads to recite Itipiso, the virtues of the Buddha. In Hinduism, the Buddha has been included into the pantheon of deities. The Buddha is just an avatar, a reincarnation of Brahma, a part of the Hindu pantheon of deities. So when we think of the Buddha as a god, as someone who can save us when we propitiate to him, that is also a wrong view, because the Buddha is no longer around. But then you might ask, how is it that by praying to the Buddha, at a stupa for example, how can your wishes be fulfilled? Why do you think so? That's because many of these stupas are inhabited by devas, Buddhist devas, powerful Buddhist devas. When they find that someone who has got a lot of faith in the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha is in trouble, sometimes they will help you, provided you are virtuous. So if you are ignorant about the reason for taking refuge, the significance of doing so, and the qualities of the refuge objects, then automatically that will give rise to doubt. There are cases of people who don't really have a profound understanding of the Buddha, Dhamma. When they face with crisis in life, then they can be easily swayed by evangelists, Christian evangelists, and then they change their faith. There's a story of one quite successful rice mill owner in Alustar, Kedah. He was in a committee of many Taoist temples, as well as in the Thai Buddhist temple. He sent his children abroad to study, and one by one, all of them became Christians. And in the end, his wife also became a Christian. He was devastated. He was a traditional Taoist Buddhist, so he felt very, very upset, and because of that, he had a lot of health problems. His arteries were blocked, then he had diabetes and gastric and all that sort of things. And finally, he also became a Christian. One could see that probably because he didn't really have a very profound understanding of the Buddha, Dhamma and the Sangha, probably also because he was influenced by the other members of his family. I'm going to read to you now a few verses from the Dhammapada, 188 to 192. They go to many a refuge, to mountains, forests, parks, trees and shrines. People threatened with danger. That's not the secure refuge. That's not the highest refuge. That's not the refuge, having gone to which you gain release from all suffering and stress. Unquote. Let me now explain this a bit. You see, here the Buddha is not denying that going to mountains, forests, parks, trees and shrines for refuge does not constitute taking refuge. That is also a form of taking refuge, but that is not the highest refuge. Okay? Taking refuge means going for protection. I think you will be aware that in many traditional Buddhist countries, although people take refuge in the Triple Gem, they still go to Datuk Kongs, they still pray to deities, right? Don't talk about Buddhism, because Buddhism believes in all these spirits and deities. Talk about Christianity. The Christian missionaries came here hundreds of years ago and they went to the forests, to the Ulu places, and they converted a lot of Orang Asli into Christians, right? A lot of those Dayaks are all Christians. But when you go to the village, you see that they are still praying to deities. Animism is still there. Of course, from the Christian point of view, all this is anathema. You are praying to Satan. If you are not 100% faithful to God or to Jesus Christ, and you pray to other images, to other deities, then you are actually not a good Christian. You are actually praying to Satan, according to them. But after having taken refuge in the Triple Gem, and then you still go to pray to the Datuk Kong, or you pray to your Kong Ma, are you actually breaching or breaking refuge in the Triple Gem? What do you think? Those of you who think that by going to the Angkong King, pray to the Angkong, or to go to the Datuk Kong and pray to it, is breaking or breaching, taking refuge in the Triple Gem. Hands up. Those who think that it's not breaking, hands up. Oh, okay. The Buddha did not say that one should not go to these places for refuge. He said that the highest refuge is to take refuge in the Triple Gem. In fact, in many suttas, the Buddha actually encouraged Buddhists to make offerings to deities, to Deva shrines, for their own welfare and protection. Okay, now let's go on to the next verse. I'm going to repeat that verse. They go to many a refuge, to mountains, forests, parks, trees and shrines. People threatened with danger. That's not the secure refuge. That's not the highest refuge. That's not the refuge, having gone to which you gain release from all suffering and stress. But when, having gone for refuge to the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, you see with right discernment the Four Noble Truths. Stress, the cause of stress, the transcending of stress, and the Noble Eightfold Path, the way to the stilling of stress. That's the secure refuge. That, the highest refuge. That is the refuge, having gone to which you gain release from all stress and suffering. This is Venerable Thanissaro's translation. When you see the word stress, he actually means dukkha, normally translated as suffering. So now we know how important it is to take refuge in the Triple Gem. Our next problem now is, what's the best way to do it? Yesterday after my talk in Miri, somebody from the audience said that she wanted to take refuge in the Triple Gem. And she asked me, are there any preparations that one needs to do before actually taking refuge in the Triple Gem? Taking refuge in the Triple Gem requires conviction in order for it to carry weight, to enjoy the privileges or the benefits that we talked about earlier. It does not mean that by merely reciting Buddham Saranam Gacchami, you take refuge. You must understand certain things. For example, you must understand the reasons for wanting to take refuge. You must understand the significance of taking refuge. And you must also understand the qualities of the refuge objects. The qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. If you are ignorant of these things, then your taking of refuge in the Triple Gem becomes a mere rite and a mere ritual, and it does not have the strength or power that the earlier suttas talked about. I think a lot of people, particularly Vesak Day Buddhists, don't really understand. They just join the crowd. Everybody says Buddham Saranam Gacchami, and they also just repeat the thing, and they call themselves Buddhists. But do they really understand why they take refuge? Do you understand why you take refuge? You don't. Huh? That's good, very frank of you. Let's talk about what are the actual reasons why we take refuge in the Triple Gem. We can look at it from three aspects. One aspect is the subjective aspect, the other is the objective aspect, and the third is the samsaric aspect. Refuge means protection from something. Take refuge, you look for protection from something. You go to the Buddha for protection. Protection from what? From the subjective point of view, it is protection from unpredictable circumstances of life. Although many of us are lucky enough to be born in a relatively affluent society compared to what's happening, for example, in Africa or in India or in the other third world countries, still, we can never be certain that such conducive circumstances will prevail forever. We never know when a tsunami will strike. We never know when an earthquake will occur. We never know when any of the natural calamities could occur. For example, in KT recently, 2 or 3 floods within a month. After the first flood and before they could finish clearing up, they are overwhelmed by the second one. So under such circumstances, when we face crisis in life, for most people, I would say that there are only 3 types of crisis. 1 is financial crisis, 2 is relationship crisis, and the 3rd is health crisis. Right? Anything else more than that? Maybe if you are a very spiritually matured person, it's a spiritual or existentialist crisis. You're searching for truth and then you cannot find what is the right religion or spiritual system for you, and you're hanging there and you become full of anguish. And that's only for a very spiritually mature person, a truth seeker. Otherwise, most of you are very happy with your material life and you don't come to the temple until you suffer. That's what happens in the West. Meditation is getting to be so popular in the West. When you go to a meditation center, who are the people who come to meditate? Those people who are suffering. They've gone through depression, they have broken up a relationship, they are in financial crisis, they are going to die of cancer. They only come to the temple, the meditation center, as a last alternative. Otherwise, they'll be so happy going to the disco, experimenting with drugs, and enjoying themselves at the beach. Because what was the Buddha's teaching all about? About suffering, right? So when you're suffering and you want to get out of suffering, you come to see the Buddha. Otherwise, if you're happy, you just leave the Buddha alone. So the first important reason for taking refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma and the Sangha is because we want protection. Protection when we face crisis. When we face crisis, we are not able to predict what's going to happen to us. It can happen anytime. Sometimes things are beyond our control. So, when you meet or encounter a crisis, how you react or respond to the crisis will determine the quality of your life. Right or not? If you are not prepared, you meet a crisis and then you feel frustrated, you get into a state of depression, regret and remorse, a very negative state of mind that could drive you crazy, could precipitate psychosomatic diseases, heart failure, cancer even, gastric and so forth. Right? On the other hand, if you have been mentally trained to cope with crisis, how to manage your mind, how to manage your emotions, then you can face crisis squarely. You can respond positively to negative circumstances. Because you have taken refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha, because you have learned the Dhamma and how to apply the principles of the Dhamma to your daily life, how to manage your emotions, how to manage your mind. So that is one of the most important reasons. The second one is from an objective point of view. Objectively, we are talking about a future life, not only just present life. The first reason is concerned about the here and now in this present lifetime, your reactions and responses to what's happening around you. The second reason is what's going to happen to you after you die, afterlife. As Buddhists, we believe that there is an afterlife. After death, there will be rebirth. It seems that nowadays many Christians also believe in rebirth. Not the Orthodox Christians, the New Age Christians. They believe in past lives, the law of karma and rebirth. Modern researchers have also done a lot of documented research on people who can recollect their past lives, and they can verify the certain claims made by these people, so that the notion or belief in rebirth now has become very plausible and accepted by many rational people because of the overwhelming evidence that has been presented. So, if we accept the fact that after death there will be a rebirth, then how can we be sure that we can be reborn in a good destination? That is the objective aspect of taking refuge in the Triple Gem, because the Buddha has stated or has advised us on certain courses of action. The Dhamma that the Buddha has discovered is not something that can be monopolized by any religion. The Buddha did not call his teachings Buddhism. Buddhism is a late word that we use to talk about the Buddha and his teachings. When he refers to his own teachings, he would say Dhamma Vinaya. Dhamma and Vinaya. Vinaya means discipline. Dhamma means phenomena or the law of nature. So actually what the Buddha rediscovered were phenomena and the laws of phenomena, how they connect with one another, how they interact with one another, which is being verified by modern scientists. Scientists have now very humbly come to the agreement that everything is related to everything else. There's a complexity of interrelationships between events. And then when you talk about quantum physicists, they will tell you that everything is in terms of probability and possibility. And that matter is actually 90% space. There's nothing inside there. When you go down to the depth of quantum physics, you will see that there's just these atoms and molecules and subatomic particles revolving around emptiness. So now they begin to appreciate the Buddha's concept of sunyata, of emptiness. There's really nothing there. And that everything is in a state of perpetual flux. You know that millions of cells in your body are dying every moment and new ones are being produced. When the Buddha has discovered these natural laws, then he revealed it to us. He says, alright, if you follow this course of action, if your thoughts, speech and actions are motivated by lobha, dosa and moha, by greed, hatred and delusion, then these are unwholesome actions that will lead to unwholesome results in the future. And if your thoughts, speech and actions are motivated by alobha, adosa and amoha, non-attachment, non-hatred and non-delusion, or from the positive point of view, generosity, loving kindness and wisdom, then these are wholesome actions which will result in wholesome results. So by understanding this, we can also plan for our future life. Following the cue of modern quantum physicists, everything is a matter of probability and possibility. We have done so much good and bad things in the past. From the beginningless samsara until now, we can imagine how much good and bad things that we have done in the past. And all the good and bad actions that we have done in the past create the coming potential that is waiting for the right time to give result. Life is not going to be plain sailing, When the time comes for the dark results to bear fruit, then you have to suffer. You suffer from backaches, cancer, debilitating diseases, you suffer from an accident, you suffer from sudden downfall in your business, and so forth. Since all these good and bad karma are already there waiting for the opportunity to ripen, we cannot erase them. So what we can do is we can only create more positive karma, more wholesome karma, to increase the possibility of wholesome results. The Buddha made use of the simile of salt crystals. If you take a pinch of salt and then dissolve it in a cup, will it taste salty? It will, right? But if you take the same pinch of salt and put it into a stream, there's hardly any significant effect. So it's the same. The grain of salt is the same volume, is the same quantity. But if it is dissolved in a small volume, it will be salty. If it's dissolved in a large volume, then it is insignificant. So if we do as much good as we can, then we are sort of increasing the volume of our solvent. So it's a matter of increasing possibilities and probabilities. So this is the second reason why we take refuge in the Triple Gem. because the Buddha has already outlined for us what are the causes of actions that will lead to a reason why we take refuge in the Triple Gem is from the samsaric point of view, to get out of this whole cycle of birth and death and rebirth, birth and death and rebirth. You may increase the possibility of having a good rebirth in the next life, but after that, what's going to happen? We don't know what's going to happen in the future. You might get a good birth, but then you might be reborn in a place where the Buddha Dhamma is not there, and you start all over again. You might do bad things, and that increases your possibility of going to a lower existence. So the third reason is to learn and practice the path that leads out of samsara, to go beyond good and evil, to be liberated totally from samsara. So that is the third reason why we take refuge in the Triple Gem. Why must we take refuge in three things? Why not just one thing? Why not just take refuge in the Buddha? Why must we take refuge in the Buddha and then the Dhamma and the Sangha? Why? Because the number 3 has become a mystical number. You also have the Holy Trinity in Christianity, and then in the Hindus also you have the 3 Devas, and you have the 3 manifestations of Rama. Other religions also they have 3. 3 becomes a very special number. There are a couple of similes that are used to explain why we take refuge in 3 objects rather than just one. And of those similes, I think this one about the doctor is the most relevant and which I like most. This simile says that the Buddha is like a doctor and you are a patient. When you are sick, you go to see a doctor and the doctor will give you a prescription after he diagnosed you. Then you take the prescription and you must do something about it, right? You just can't keep it in your pocket or burn it like a hu and drink it. Can you get well? Or take the prescription and put it under your pillow and expect to get well? You cannot. Right? After getting the prescription, you must go to the pharmacist and get your drugs. And then after that, diligently take the dosage as prescribed by the doctor. And then only you will get well. But if you are very sick, so sick that you cannot do it yourself, you need to be admitted in the hospital, to be warded, and for the nurses to take care of you. Right? So it's the same, taking refuge in the Triple Gem. The Buddha is like a doctor. He gives you a prescription, and the prescription is contained in the scriptures. Right? After reading the scriptures, then you must try to put them into practice. If you just take the scriptures and put it in the cupboard and every day you do puja, or you burn it and then you drink the water, you're not going to get anything out of it. And then if you become so confused, you're not sure how to interpret the Dhamma or how to really put it into practice, then you have to consult the Sangha. Because the Sangha is the community that has preserved and perpetuated the teachings of the Buddha. If not for the Sangha, there will be no more Dhamma. During the Buddha's time, we didn't have any videos, any MP3 recorders or tape recorders to record what the Buddha said. All were remembered by heart. And then they had to transmit this from one generation to another. And this was transmitted by the Sangha for several hundred years before it was put into writing. Even now that it's put into writing, not every member of the Sangha understands what the scriptures are. And only a select few members of the Sangha really knows how to gain access to these teachings and put them into practice. Even a smaller number put them into practice. So that's why when we take refuge in 3 things: the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. The Buddha because he was the one who founded the path, discovered the path, and the Dhamma because that is the prescription, and the Sangha because they are the ones who have preserved the qualities of the objects of refuge. I'm not going to talk too much about the Buddha. I'm going to concentrate more on the Dhamma because that's what you will need in order to face crisis in life. The Sangha can be consulted when you have problems. What the Sangha tells you will also be based on the Dhamma. What is the Dhamma? If you are in a Pali class or English class and you do Pali chanting, you will know that you will start off with Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo, right? What is Swakato? Swakato means well expounded is the Dhamma by the Blessed One. And then Sanditiko, to be seen by oneself. Agaliko, immediate. Ehipasiko, inviting one to come and see. Obanayiko, leading onwards. Vedidabo, Vinyuhi, to be realized by the wise. So out of these 6 qualities, the last 5 are experiential in nature that can be verified by yourself. The first one is an all-inclusive big set. The last 5 are a subset of the first one, which means that There are many things in the Buddha's teachings which we cannot verify experientially by oneself. For example, the law of karma. Can you verify exactly which karma gives rise to which effect? You cannot. For example, the belief in rebirth. Although it is now very plausible because of the evidence that have been collected, we can accept rebirth based on evidence. It is not something experiential. We cannot remember our past life, right? And for most people, unless you're a special person with psychic powers, or you go through meditation and then you can develop those psychic powers to actually review your past life. Another thing is, for example, the existence of devas. How did you know that devas exist in the various realms that the Buddha talked about? You wouldn't know. You may say that mediums exist. We know that there are supernatural things that happen. That's true. Because of that, you can infer that devas exist. But have you seen them yourselves? Have you experienced them yourself? Most of us haven't. So a lot of things that the Buddha revealed to us cannot be verified experientially. But nevertheless, they are well expounded because the Buddha saw them, discovered them, and then he revealed them to us. So this is sometimes faith is also very important. Brother Ong's son is working in Pakistan. He is working as a chief supervisor in a resort. He has under him many Pakistani workers. Pakistani workers are rather laid back, and he has to check on them frequently to make sure that they are working according to schedule. But if you catch them taking a nap during office hours, they will say, no, it's the will of Allah that I'm taking a nap. If you sack them and say, oh, it's okay, I don't mind, it's the will of Allah that I get sacked from this work. So it's a sort of a very fatalistic acceptance. But that sort of fatalistic acceptance also improves that person's quality of life, subjective quality of life, because he doesn't feel bad about it. If you were sacked from your job, you go and see the labor office, you go and see this and see that to try to get back your job, or you sue your employer, right? You get all worked up and very angry because you are reacting to it. But if you have faith, this is one advantage of faith, although it's blind faith. We also have a certain degree of blind faith. A lot of things we cannot verify, we accept. But because of our acceptance, it helps us to accept things for what they are. For example, if you are suddenly diagnosed of having terminal cancer, and the doctor says, we don't have any cure for you. At first, there's going to be denial. They're going to say, oh, why must it be me of all people? Right? That's the first thing that people will say. But when they strike a lottery, they don't ask why it must be me, Only when they get terminal cancer, only then they say, why must it be me? Ajahn Brahm has a very good way of answering that. He says, why not? Why not? It can happen to anyone. That's a wonderful miracle about human beings, is that they can see people dying all over the place. They read in the newspapers. You see in TV people dying, but you never think that you're going to die one day. It's a miracle of a human being. So it's also good to have a certain degree of faith in accepting things. There's only one quality of the Dhamma that encompasses all, which is that it's well expounded. Then the other 5 qualities are all based on experiential verification. That's why the principles of the Dhamma has become so popular in the West. These 5 qualities of the Dhamma do not need any prerequisite for faith. The methodology is very scientific, very objective. You have a hypothesis, the procedure for carrying out your experiment, and then the end result. And you carry out your experiment in order to verify the objective of what you want to do. So the hypothesis is that if you're able to direct your mind in a certain way, then you will get certain results. Better psychological and physical well-being as a result of proper attention given to the objects of the senses that impinge on your field of awareness. How you react, how you respond to circumstances. In several suttas, the Buddha was asked, sometimes by Brahmins, sometimes by wanderers, sometimes by even monks. He would ask, it is said that the Dhamma is to be seen by oneself, it's immediate, it's inviting one to come and see, is leading onwards, is to be realized by the wise. How can I understand it to be so? Then the Buddha would explain. Now, when greed, hatred and delusion is present in you, can you know that it's present? If it's absent in you, do you know that it's absent? You can, right? So when you are able to see your defilements within you, when they are there and when they are not there, that is one way that the Dhamma is directly visible, here and now. Inviting one to come and see. You can invite anyone to see his own defilements. If you are honest enough and frank enough, you will know when lust arises in you, when anger arises in you, when conceit or jealousy arises in you. You know, right? So basically, the Dhamma that the Buddha is talking about is experiential in nature. You can actually see it for yourself, and if you see it in a way that is recommended by the Buddha, then you will get certain positive results. That is why nowadays in the West, this approach has been adopted by the scientific community, particularly in the field of psychotherapy. Nowadays we have a lot of mindfulness-based psychotherapies where they make use of the method of directing one's attention to observe phenomena for what they are in an objective way to help their patients recover from psychological stress. And that is the crux of the problem when you face crisis. How are you going to react? How are you going to respond? Besides just being objective about it, having faith in karma, the law of karma, the law of conditionality, will also help to ease your resistance. Like the case I talked about, those Pakistani workers. Even though you don't watch the defilements within you, if you just have faith that it is Sionia was introduced to one particular mindfulness-based psychotherapy called ACT, Acceptance Commitment Therapy, because one of the Taipingnites is working in the UK in the National Health Hospital. She's a therapist there, so she's coming back to Taiping and she wants to spend some time in Sasana to learn more about the Buddhist practice of mindfulness so that they can improve or compare with what they're using in their therapy. And as I read through the principles that are used in this psychotherapy, I found that they're very Buddhist in a sense because they make use of those principles. Although they say that they did research on this for over 20 years through practice by applying these principles to psychiatric patients. And it was sort of an independent research, but finally they found that it corresponds very much with Buddhist principles. Okay, anyway, let's share this because these 6 principles are basically very Buddhistic in nature. If you understand these principles, you can apply them to your daily lives and to your advantage when you encounter crisis. So taking refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma and the Sangha involves learning about such principles so that you can apply them. First, I'll give you an acronym, and then after that it's easier to remember. The first one is called dissociate, so it's D. Second one is accept, A. Third one is be present, B. Fourth one is observe the self, is O. The fifth one is personalize your values, which is P. And the last one is act. So is the POBA. Let me explain. They start off with this basic premise that we human beings are gifted with language. And because we have language, we are able to conceptualize, compared to animals which do not have language. Animals are not able to plan for the far future. They can plan immediately. After I eat the fruits in this tree, I'm going to fly over to that tree. But they cannot plan for tomorrow. They cannot plan a week ahead. Whereas for us, we have a yearly plan and we have a monthly plan and a weekly schedule and a daily schedule. We can plan things ahead. And we can even conceptualize things that have not yet happened and create concepts out of concepts into very complicated, complex notions and theories. So that is the advantage of having language. The disadvantage of having language, verbal language, is that we tend to associate with them. All this language takes place in our thoughts. We think first and then we speak. When I speak to you, by right you are actually hearing only vibrations, right? You're hearing vibrations in your ears. But because you understand what I'm saying, your mind is processing that vibrations and assigning certain, what you call, meaning to them. And then you understand what I say. ถ้าหากอาตมาพูดภาษาไทยไม่มีคนที่นี่เข้าใจได้เข้าใจไหมเนี่ยคนไทยนะนิดหน่อย aham bali bhasaya talapami konukho janati. You understand that? Okay, that's Pali. You can't understand, so it's just vibrations to you. right? And your mind is wondering, what is he trying to say? But it's just vibrations to you. What I'm trying to say is that all these things happen in the mind. And when we have thoughts, although the advantage of having verbal thoughts based on language helps us to conceptualize and plan for the future, the disadvantage of having thoughts, verbal thoughts, is that we associate with them. We think that the thoughts belong to us. The thoughts are us. When you have a thought that arises, say, oh, I'm lousy, I'm inefficient, I'm inadequate, I'm not as good as the other person. These thoughts of low esteem. Thought is just a thought. If you identify with the thought and you think that that thought is you, then you get caught up in depression and frustration and all that sort of stuff. So the first step is to be able to dissociate yourself from the thought. The thought does not belong to you, like what the Buddha says is anatta. Everything arises and passes away, not in a random way, not without any cause, but there are always causes and conditions behind any arising. So if you're able to see things arising and passing away due to causes and conditions, then we understand what is non-self. And when we understand what is non-self, then the solidity of our self-created image or ego begins to dissolve. Then we are not caught up in the delusion that our self-image or our ego is something real. We know that it's necessary. You need to create a self-image in order to survive and operate in this world. But that self-image, that ego, is only a creation, it's not the real thing. It changes all the time. So the first step is to dissociate yourself from this. If you're a meditator, you know, when you're sitting meditating, when thoughts arise, you just say thinking, planning, whatever, and you watch those thoughts, you don't attach to them, you don't try to push them away, you don't indulge in them, you just let them go, and you come back to your rising and falling, or to your anapana, to your breath, right? Or you just ignore them. However, for people who are not trained in mindfulness meditation, for example in the West, how do they apply this? They have creative ways of doing it. For example, somebody is suffering from low self-esteem. He's always telling himself, I'm very lousy, I'm inadequate, I'm inefficient. So he comes to see the psychiatrist, and then the psychiatrist says, okay, you lie down on the couch and you tell me what you feel. He says, oh, I feel lousy. How do you know you feel lousy? Oh, because I can see my thoughts. How do you see your thoughts? I see my thoughts in terms of words. Okay, then spell it out. Okay, I-A-M-L-O-U-S-Y. Okay, you see those words? Yeah, I can imagine those words. Okay, then he says, now the next thing you do is change the font. Change it from Arial to Times New Roman, or from Times New Roman to Georgia, or to Tahoma. Then after that he says, okay, you put in font effects. You bold it, or you italicize it, or you make it blink, or put a shadow. So this guy was feeling very down. But after the psychiatrist guided him to this, then he started to laugh and chuckle. Because you're no longer associating with your thoughts anymore. Right? This is one way of teaching people who don't know meditation. If you know meditation, you just watch those thoughts, let them go, you don't get involved in them. But because they don't know meditation, this is one creative way of dissociating from your thoughts. Then you begin to see that your thoughts are just words and things that you can turn around and play with. So eventually, you dissociate from the thoughts and you get some relief. The second step is accept. Accept things for what they are. If anger arises in you, be aware that anger has arisen in you. Don't be angry because you are angry. If anxiety arises in you, don't be anxious because you are anxious. People sometimes are very judgmental upon themselves. When you get angry at somebody whom you're not supposed to get angry, because you're supposed to have gratitude for him, maybe your parent, angry thoughts arise, and then you are very judgmental of yourself and you say, oh, I shouldn't be angry. And then you are angry at yourself for being angry. And that's how people suffer from this anxiety syndrome. When they get anxious, then immediately they get even more worried because they feel that, oh, this anxiety is going to cause me to get worried and I'm not be able to stop it. And so they're anxious because they're anxious because they're anxious, and because they're anxious, then it goes around. Modern biochemists and biophysicists have been making research into this. They say that when the mind produces an emotive feeling, it means that the mind actually triggers off the hypothalamus or other glands in the body that secretes certain amino acids, harmful malignant amino acids, which they call neuropeptides. And these neuropeptides are produced by the millions, and they will attack the healthy cells in the body. That's why you feel congestion in this area. That's why you have fever throughout the whole body. So actually they are damaging your healthy cells. Imagine, even after you have stopped thinking angry thoughts, the process is still going on. It's just like stepping on your brakes. It will take some time before the production of these neuropeptides come to a halt. If you continue thinking angry thoughts, more of these will be produced. That's why people get psychosomatic diseases. Some years ago, I read a book by Dr. Ornish. Maybe some of you who have got heart problems might have heard of Dr. Ornish's heart disease reversal program from the US. In his book, he was talking about how research was being made on people who have heart disease and who get cancer. They seem to indicate that many patients went through a traumatic period whereby they cannot express some of their emotions to other people, sympathetic people. People don't listen to them, or because they are very isolated and they keep the emotions within themselves. That causes all these debilitating diseases. There's no wonder, because it's caused by the mind. When your mind is in a very depressive or unwholesome state, then it produces all these neuropeptides and other mind-made matter in the body that are actually very damaging. So when you face crisis, health crisis or financial crisis or relationship crisis, then that's when you need to know how to handle your emotions, that you do not react negatively to all these negative circumstances. Let's come back to the third step. Okay, now you accept things for what they are. You accept anger for what it is. You don't get angry over your anger. But as I said, the mind needs an object, so you shift your object to something in the present moment. Be present. When you get angry thoughts, you feel all these physical emotions in the body, watch that. Or if you are doing some work and then a memory is triggered off and you start to think of something traumatic and then you feel emotion, then immediately that you notice it, let it go, don't dwell on it, come back to whatever you're doing. Whether you're sitting in front of the computer doing your work, or you're at the kitchen washing dishes, whatever you're doing, come back to the present moment, be aware of what is happening at that moment. So that is one way of distracting your thoughts from the past or the future. The easiest way to come back to the present moment is to be with your five senses, because your five senses can take only present objects. Right? You can see, hear, smell, taste, touch, only objects of the present moment. You cannot see something of the past with your eyes, nor can you see something of the future with your eyes. Right? But when you're asleep, you're fast asleep and all your senses are shut down. You're having a nice dream, and in that dream you're in a party, you hear music, you're dancing, you're eating, you're drinking, you're doing everything in your dream. Who is doing that? The mind. So the mind is a culprit. It's the mind that can think of the past, it can think of the future, it can conceptualize, it can imagine, it can hallucinate, it can fantasize. So it's the mind that is the cause of the problem. So if you want to distract yourself on all these thoughts that are causing you negative emotions, come back to the present moment. Be with your senses. So be present. That is the third step. What is the fourth step? Observe the self. Even when you are having angry thoughts, even when you are having depressive thoughts, frustration, anxiety, anger, conceit, if you are able to step back and look at what's happening, you'll notice that there's a mind that is looking at things objectively. There's one mind that is watching the angry mind. And that mind doesn't seem to be affected by the anger. And then when you understand that, then you begin to understand that, oi, this anger is not me. Because there's this other guy behind is watching. Right? Who is this guy who is watching, and who is this fellow who is angry? So when you watch the mind that is watching the anger or all these negative states, it seems to be in a neutral state. It is an objective mind that is watching things. Then you also watch the mind that is watching everything to see that it is actually also a conditioned phenomena. That mind has arisen because you have programmed your mind to do it that way. Because you listen to this talk tomorrow when you have some problems, then you say, oh, Bhante said this. You remember what's the next step? Is to personalize your values. We have to refer you back to the first quality of the Dhamma, which is well expounded is the Dhamma by the Buddha. So, from the Dhamma that the Buddha has expounded, there are things that cannot be directly verifiable, that are not directly verifiable. For example, the Buddha talks about the 5 precepts, he talks about the 8 precepts, he talks about moral values, and he talks about the 10 types of wholesome conduct, 10 causes of unwholesome action, and so forth. These are the values that we need to personalize for ourselves. Of these things that the Buddha has expounded, what sort of person do you want to be? Do you want to be a successful businessman, regardless of whether your precepts are whole or not? Or will you rather guard your precepts and be a poor man? But you have to decide for yourself. No one is going to decide for you. You have to understand the consequences for it. But it's not necessarily one or the other. You can also be a person who has moral integrity and still make a lot of money. Depends on your creativity to be able to do that. There are also many success stories of people who stuck to their precepts and made it. After going through the Buddha's teachings, the Dhamma, you have to select from there whatever that you want to achieve in life. What sort of values you want. Based on those values, after you have gone through the preliminary steps, then you have to act. You're not in a retreat center where you just observe things and let them go. You still have to act in this world. But you have to act in accordance with the values that you have customized for yourself. So this is the whole process of psychotherapy that they use in the West. Not only this particular type of psychotherapy, because there are other mindfulness-based therapies as well. For example, those that they teach to cancer patients who have to experience a lot of physical suffering. Sometimes when you watch pain as a meditator, you will know that when there's pain, the mind tends to tense up and try to battle with the pain. That's when it gets worse. If you want to watch pain, you must accept it for what it is and not resist it. So this whole exercise is about acceptance, it's about disengaging or dissociating yourself from the thoughts, emotions, and observing the non-self nature of phenomena. When you find that there's nobody home, there's no one to protect, no self, no ego to protect, then it makes life easier. So essentially, when you face crisis, it's a matter of how well you can manage your mind and your emotions to react or respond positively. So that's how, by taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, you can actually face crisis in life squarely. Okay, that ends my talk. Any questions? You asking my opinion? Yes. He's talking about Christians doing this deathbed conversion, whether it's harmful to a person or not. Well, we could have deathbed conversions for Buddhists as well. There are a couple of stories in the scriptures which talk about Brahmins who don't really have any faith in the Buddha, but towards the end of their life, maybe they beheld the Buddha coming near them. They had a lot of faith in him, and then when they died, because of the faith in the Buddha, they were reborn in favorable existence, even though they didn't do much good deeds. There's also another sutta called the Mahakamavibhanga Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, which talks about people who are generally morally upright and good, but towards the end of their life, they might do something bad because of the last few thought moments. They might have held to a wrong view. Then, because of that, they could go to unfavorable existence. Then there's also the converse. A person may have been morally bad generally throughout his life, but towards the end of his life, he could have changed his faith and then got right view instead and created a lot of wholesome mental states by having faith in the right objects. And that also, because it's a wholesome state of mind, could also land him in favorable existence despite his immoral sort of life. So if a person who is generally irreligious, before he dies, he panics because death is just around the corner, and only now he ponders over what is going to happen after death. He has not been prepared for it. So it's like a dying man grasping at the last straw. Anything. If you're a Buddhist, you go there and try to convert him also, he will do that. If you're a Christian, you go in there, he will also do that, whoever comes first. One of our devotees, whole family is very Buddhistic. One of them is a Theravadin, the others are all Pure Land Buddhists. But the father was not a religious person at all. He didn't believe in any of these things. When he was about to die, his wife managed to convince him to take refuge in Amitabha Buddha. He agreed, and then he allowed them to recite Namo Amitofo around him. The daughter was a Theravadian, so she came to tell me, it's very strange. After my father passed away, the group of Pure Land Buddhists would come and they would recite 6 to 7 hours non-stop. And then she said, incredible, after they have done all the chanting, the corpse was not stiff. It became very calm and peaceful, and there was even rosy cheeks. The father was not a religious person at all. He never believed in all these things, but towards the end of his life, he took refuge in Amitabha. So if a person is in a state where he's very confused and desperate, he doesn't know what's going to happen in the hereafter, and then somebody comes here and offers him a good bargain, and he dies with a comfortable state of mind, then it's also possible that he could go to a good destination. So, I mean, instead of criticizing the Christians, if you could do that as a Buddhist, then it's also commendable. Okay?
The Christians do to the Buddhists.
Okay. Well, that means the Buddhist doesn't really have true faith. If he really has true faith, he wouldn't accept that. That is shaking. Shakeable.
Developing unshakable faith.
Yeah, developing unshakable faith. That comes only with the Dhamma. When you realize the Dhamma, then you'll see you have confirmed or unshakable faith in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. But there's one sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya, Sarakani Sutta, where the Buddha talked about this. Sarakani, the Sakyan. It seems that he was a drinker. So after he died, people went to ask the Buddha what has happened to him. And then the Buddha says, well, he has become a sotapan. And then people started to laugh, oh, if he can become a sotapan, so can I. He's a drinker. He doesn't even keep the 5th precept well. Then at that point, the Buddha talked about different types of individuals. And he talks about people who are freed from apaya, who will not get to be reborn in the woeful states again. And these are, of course, the Arahants, the Anagamis, the Sakadagamis, and the Sotapans. These all have confirmed unshakable faith in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Then there are 2 other cases of people who do not have confirmed or unshakable faith in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. These 2 cases also do not go to apaya after they die. It does not mean that they are freed from the woeful realms. It's talking about this particular existence. After this existence, when they die, they don't get to be reborn in the woeful realm. They don't have confirmed confidence in the Buddha. And they do not have joyous or swift wisdom like the others earlier on. But they have the 5 spiritual faculties. They have faith, they have energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. They have faith, but it's not unshakable faith. And then they accept the Dhamma after reflection. And these are thinkers, maybe intellectuals and thinkers. They think, oh yeah, it sounds reasonable, so they accept it. They also have these 5 faculties, but they are not highly developed. So this person also does not go to the woeful realm after he dies, because he has faith and the other qualities. And the second person is one who is also similar. He does not have the joyous, swift wisdom like the Aryas, like the noble ones, but he also has the 5 faculties of faith, mindfulness, energy, concentration, and wisdom. And he also has sufficient faith in and devotion to the Buddha. But this other person doesn't have that wisdom. He's not an intellectual. He's a faith follower, so to speak. He will just say, I have faith in the Buddha. And because of that faith in the Buddha, and of course the other spiritual faculties which are not very highly developed, after death he also is not bound for the woeful realms. There are 2 other interesting suttas in the Samyutta Nikaya. There it says that there are 3 types of people. One is a person who listens to the discourse where the Buddha said the 5 aggregates are impermanent, suffering, non-self, and so forth. And then the 6 sense bases are also anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanent, suffering, and not-self. And so forth. He will analyze the human personality into these different elements and say all of these are anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanent, suffering, and not-self. So one of these persons is someone who accepts this after pondering over them. It sounds reasonable. These things they are impermanent. So he is called a Dhammanusari, a follower of the Dhamma. And this person, according to the Buddha, will eventually attain Sotapanna before he dies. And then the second one is Saddhanusari, a faith follower. This person accepts all these out of faith, not because he reasoned them out. So he just accepts it out of faith. And also this person is called a Saddhanusari, a faith follower, and he also is assured of becoming a Sotapanna before he dies. And then the third person is one who actually sees that the five aggregates are impermanent, suffering, and not self. He actually sees that these six sense bases are impermanent, suffering, and not self. And he becomes a Sotapanna. So you've got three individuals. One who actually sees, who has knowledge and vision of the impermanence, suffering, and non-self character of the five aggregates or the sense bases. He's a Sotapanna. If you do not know, do not have the insight into them, do not have experiential understanding of these things, but you accept it out of faith, then you are a Saddhanusari. That means you are a faith follower and you will be assured of becoming a Sotapanna before you die. If you are intellectual and you think about it, maybe you practice a little bit and you see a bit of it and you accept it out of reflective reasoning, then you are also assured of becoming a Sotapanna before you die. That's what is stated in the Samyutta Nikaya. I'm not the one giving you the guarantee, okay?
This sounds very good.
Sounds, yeah. Sounds very good, yeah.
A lot of hope there.
Okay, any more? Yes.
Just now your story on the Sarantik.
Sarakani, yeah.
Yeah, you're saying that he became a Sotapanna after he passed away, but he was...
Not after he passed away. Okay, I forgot to finish the story. Actually, he was a boozer, alcoholic. He can't even keep the fifth precept. How can he become a Sotapanna? So the Buddha, after he went through all these, said that